I have mentioned in my analysis in the previous, no, as my one thing that I want to use to conclude my kind of research is to show how using feminist foreign policy frameworks can enable us to address these systemic issues. So by integrating gender analysis into these economic and development initiatives, I'm proposing an alternative framework that foregrounds, say, redistributive justice and recognizing, say, the care economy or addressing the value of unpaid labor. We can challenge the meritocratic ideals that are propagated by these capitalist models and reframing these kind of models to further economic inclusion and which encompasses socio-cultural, economic, and political dimensions as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Over to the experts now.
Yeah, I think my major problematic area I see is the use of word conservative for India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Conservatism as a behavior or a political action is a one thing which most of the countries are this thing. If you see the Nobel laureates analysis after in last 200 years of history, even when she shows the 4 phases of gender gap, no, and the last gap is where women and men in the industrialized societies have a same qualification, same level of commitment to the career, and the contraceptive revolution has produced so many women who are not ready, who are not going to give birth to the baby. Okay, so they are totally 24/7 available for career, and still you have a gender pay gap of 1:10. So that is conservatism. That the Fortune 500 companies who talk about equality or gender diversity, they don't do it in their personal because they want to make a profit. They want to use women as a cheap labor. When it comes, and the same capitalist development also uses racism, sexism, homophobia, all these ideologies to maintain their profit. Okay, because they are the ones who can be stigmatized, who can be dehumanized, and who can be used as the cheapest labor. No, the way dualism we see in the migration policy. Most of the rich countries have a migration policy. They are using quote unquote illegal migrant by paying them 1/10 of their salary. Okay, what the white worker would get. And this same in South Africa.
Yes,
What explained prosperity of South Africa? It was apartheid, because the average black worker, African worker, was getting 1/3 salary as that of a white worker. So conservatism for a vested interest is a ideology and practice which everybody has utilized. So it's no use telling India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan at conservatism. Okay, so if you go by, say, objectification of woman being treated just as a body, and more you show your skin, you are considered to be more beautiful. Oh, which countries? So industrialized countries are doing more. When I was in LSE and there was a girl from Oxford University, she said, I feel like going back to burqa. The way women's bodies were commodified, they were treated as spare part for sale. It is the media construction of seeing women only as a body, your lips and your eyes and your boobs and your. This is the way. Don't you think it is conservatism? Not seeing women
yes,
as a human being. That is one.
Yes,
Third one is that misogyny in politics. We don't have that level of misogyny. We have had heads of the institutions in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh and Pakistan and India who were prime ministers. Do you think any of these Western countries would allow a woman to be prime minister? Have you read what all they were saying about what is her name? Clinton's wife. Yeah, and currently the kind of misogynist outburst they had against a woman who contested for prime minister's post, except for Margaret Thatcher and German lady Merkel. Who else had a head of the state? Which are the countries which had industrialized countries which had woman prime minister, and how they made the life of that woman prime minister in New Zealand so miserable that she had to resign with tears. So I think conservatism and the political power, they are very much, because whenever it suits you, you use liberal ideology, and whenever you want to demolish women or not allow them to come out, you use this conservative act. So you can use conservatism and conservative acts, but calling nation states at conservative is problematic, because you are putting whole experience of colonization of 200 years of all these countries. If there were no British rulers in South Asia, okay, if we had our own way of growing our economy, maybe the results would have been very different. We had never seen women in Kerala even covering their head. None of the women in South India were covering their head. Now they are doing it. So it also the kind of political and geopolitical dynamics that create, like in my generation, all women in Afghanistan, they were extremely educated. They were traveling freely. They were wearing any type of dress. Nobody bothered them. And now in 2023, you have Taliban and things have changed. So it is the political dynamics which create the kind of policies you follow, no? So like women in Kerala, they never wore burqa and now they are wearing the Gulf influence, they are saying it. So conservatism is also context specific, political environment specific, and also the economic needs of the economic space. The MG Narega, nobody competed to get job in Narega. But during pandemic, when men were standing in a queue, women were asked to sit at home and look after their elderly, care for the family. So again, the conservatism crept in only in the post-pandemic period when men were unemployed, no? Same First World War and Second World War. When men were fighting at the war front, women were running the economy. As soon as they came back, women were told to go back and their dress code changed and they had to produce babies. After every war, women are asked to produce more babies as a national duty. That is conservatism, not treating women as citizens, but just treating them as a baby producing machine. No? So I think you need to be careful about how you use the word conservative. Conservatism is happening in different historical phases in different countries, acceptable. But calling some nations as conservative and some nations as liberal, that is a problem. That is a problem.
Yes, ma'am, I completely understand, and I would definitely be including that kind of aspect into my work as well, considering even in France or even in the United States, the kind of shift that has taken in the recent times or even before towards a conservative, misogynistic kind of mindset towards women. I'll definitely be able to learn more from this and include it into my research as well. Thank you so much.
And France has also said if woman produces third child, state would give her more compensation because they want French women to produce more babies. As the way they lose their French identity because the migrants will hope. That's the kind of ideology which even the French elite is using.
I think same in Japan.
Same in Britain also. Why did Britain leave European Union? The British nation would go away. That was the fear which the conservatives used, no?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am. Very interesting points. And also, some points from my side is firstly about, the post-liberalization era, especially in India. How are we balancing the meritocracy and also the responsibility of the government to provide employment opportunities? Especially because post 1991, and then you give the example of Beti Bachao and Beti Padhao. So what transitioned in between? Because there are many states, especially like Jharkhand and now New Delhi, the government has also announced that once they come to power, they'll be giving 2,100 rupees to women. So does this enforce that kind of meritocracy, or that would it be more important to provide stipends to women who are educated to a certain degree, or is it really enforcing that kind of a laziness and dependency upon? So are we fostering a workforce, a ready workforce? Because the situation is where we are in, we will not be able to change, at least for the time being. So where are we going forward with this kind of socioeconomic and political setup? And secondly, about if you could also incorporate the importance of gig work, how has it developed, and how is the capitalist framework trying to spread its wings? Certainly there is a lot of exploitation in that regard. across all countries, and it's for all men and women, and but women are further pushed to the margins. So this could be also an important point of inquiry. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, experts. And next we have Preeti ji's presentation. Preeti ji, please go ahead with your presentation.
I've shared my presentation. Yeah, can you please share it for me? A very warm good evening to all the panel members. It has indeed been enriching Fridays for me, and thank you so much for this opportunity to present my topic. My topic, I'm Dr. Preeti Ramani Nair. I'm an assistant professor in School of Law, GD Goenka University. I transitioned into academia 4 years back. Before that, I was practicing in the Delhi High Court and the National Company Law Tribunal. So the topic of my presentation today is Women in the Workforce, Challenges, Opportunities and Strategies for Equality in Foreign Policy. Next slide, please. Women's participation in the workforce has been indeed a big catalyst for the economic growth, the social transformation and innovation in policies globally. In fact, as one of the presenters stated, the various legal framework in India, and I resonate with her. The principle of gender equality has been incorporated throughout the length and breadth of Indian Constitution, be its preamble, be its fundamental rights, fundamental duties, directive principles. And the Constitution not only ensures that there's equality for women, but it also authorizes the state to implement measures for effective action in their favor. However, in spite of a very robust legal framework, the women's underrepresentation in leadership positions, particularly in influencing foreign policy, it remains a critical challenge till date. In fact, the evolving role of women business leaders, it highlights their potential to bridge gaps in diplomacy and advocate for a more equitable foreign policy and drive sustainable development. Next slide, please. Now, what prompted me to do this research is that because I believe that women play a pivotal role. In fact, the women business leaders, there are several examples which I've been discussing, they've played a pivotal role in shaping the foreign policy, whether it be shaping the economic diplomacy by means of women leaders of various corporations engaging in trade negotiations or promoting policies which foster international trade and investment, aligning their corporate goals with national interests, or whether it be advocating for more diversity and inclusion and influencing foreign policy agendas to prioritize gender equality and social inclusion, whether it is the corporate social responsibility initiatives whereby women business leaders, corporate leaders are several times seen driving the global conversations on sustainability, on labor rights, and more importantly on ethical business practices, and more importantly the persona of women business leaders in fulfilling a very important role in conflict resolution and peace buildings. So we have here women business leaders who are doing it all. Next slide, please. My research objectives are very clear: to explore the challenges which are faced by women in the workforce and their implications on foreign policy, to identify opportunities where women's participation enhances formulation and implementation of foreign policy, to analyze strategies for achieving gender equality and its impact on global decision making, and to highlight examples of women business leaders which have been influencing foreign policy. Now, I've skipped, inadvertently, I've skipped the slide on research methodology, but my research methodology will be doctrinal, wherein I will be analyzing various laws like the Companies Act, the gaps in them which inhibit women in fulfilling their leadership roles. I will be analyzing the policies of the WTO, the International Labour Organization, and some of the surveys which have been done by the National Women Commission, by the National Sample Survey Organization, to highlight what are the various gaps which inhibit the women from rising as business leaders and fulfilling this important role. Next slide,
Preeti ji,
please.
you have half a minute to wrap up.
Yeah, so I've just divided my paper into chapters or sections, where the first will be the introduction chapter. The second will be various challenges like structural barriers, pay gap, underrepresentation, glass ceiling, cultural and social biases. The next section would be the opportunities for women in influencing global policy, and I would also discuss some of the case studies with respect to various business leaders which have been women business leaders which have been shaping foreign policy. Prominent among them, Indira Nooyi, who was the former CEO of PepsiCo. She advocated for sustainable practices, aligning businesses and environmental diplomacy. Arundhati Bhattacharya, former chairperson, State Bank of India. She represented Indian banking in global forums and which reinforced India's economic diplomacy. Sheryl Sandberg, former CEO of Facebook, now known as Meta. She advocated for technology for use in peace building efforts. Emma Wamsley, who is the CEO of GlaxoSmithKline, she contributed to international health initiatives aligning corporate goals with global health diplomacy. Next slide, please. Some of my major suggestions, which I've just thought about it, is incorporating gender equality into CSR initiatives, adopting zero tolerance policies on discrimination, promoting women business leaders in diplomatic roles, and developing inclusive policies for women in this workforce, which include creating flexible working hours, remote working options, parental leave that benefit both genders, acknowledging the unpaid care which is given by women, enabling women to balance both professional and personal capacities. Gender equality is a foreign policy, which is a strategic necessity in addressing global challenges effectively. And I believe when gender perspectives are integrated into foreign policy, they enhance the inclusivity, foster equality, and strengthen international relations by addressing diverse corporate as well as national perspectives. Thank you.
I think you have made a very comprehensive view of the problem, but I think when it comes to the women in the labor force, currently, globally also the issue which is discussed very seriously is the gender pay gap. The gender pay gap not only between men and women in of the same nationality, but even the gender pay gap between the local versus foreigners, or even in the same organization, the white worker would get one salary. I know so many of my feminist friends who are working for various embassies. They said, no, but you are Indian, so we will give you 50,000 as per the Indian rate. But the same colleague in the same office would be getting $8,000, no? And whenever they demanded parity in the wages, they were forced to resign. So this is also happening in a big way. Plus, gender pay gap in using horizontal inequality and vertical inequality. Horizontal equality, you have the same position. Your status may be the same of a manager or junior manager or senior manager, but still you are treated differently in terms of wages and in terms of perks that you get. And vertical inequality that you just don't allow. You face the glass ceiling or the glass cliff or glass lift or whatever those glasses, no, various or sticky floor where you just don't can rise. So I think these are the very important categories which you need to bring in when it comes to the foreign policy, because what kind of equality and parity we are talking when we accept gender diversity, then how can we have intersectional inequalities based on ethnicity and race and religion, or local versus migrant, or insider versus outsider, or the sons of the sun.
Absolutely, ma'am. And I resonate with your views. And in fact, I was shocked to read the labor force survey by the National Sample Survey Organization this year in June, and the statistics are alarming. That the labor force
Correct.
participation rate for males in India is a whopping 78.8%, and for the females is 41.7%. So.
No, and if you deconstruct this category, where are these women? Most
There are
of
these
them are they are called quote unquote self-employed. What is self-employed? You don't get job anywhere else, so you go to your field, or you go to whatever family business you have, potter or a blacksmith or this, you join because you won't sit idle, no, you will do something or the other. And they are classified as workers. They are actually unpaid family labor, but they are classified as self-employed. So that is also the catch there, that you don't get job which would give you self-actualization or give you any kind of enhancement in your future. No, it is just a dead-end job that you are doing.
Also, ma'am, I believe there has to be a mechanism to at least, if not monetize, acknowledge the unpaid care given by women. Because at present, the GDP does not count such women.
Yeah, that is at
And
a
there
national
have been-
level, yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
and there have been surveys in which they've even by, as I was reading NSSO survey,
One
which
has to
says that yes, that the unpaid care which is given by women is 10 times more than men.
more than that,
More
correct.
than men, and it's invisible actually, and
Yeah,
even the
yeah.
laws don't recognize it in India.
Yeah. But at the same time, wages for housework is also not, because by then you are institutionalizing that women have to do housework and men will do the work outside job. So that is also not.
Right,
But
right. That's another-
acknowledgement
that's
is
another
important.
question. Right.
Acknowledgement is important. Yeah. Yeah. So I think what should be the ground rule? You can give some vision about what transnational corporations and multinational corporations
Ma'am,
should be
one
doing.
would be,
Why can't they have one labor policy in US and the same company having different labor policy in Bangalore, and why it is different in New York or
Ma'am, the implementation
Chicago?
of the laws itself is very different here and in other countries. If you see the Companies Act, we have a provision, there was an amendment in 2013 in which, there was an amendment that you have to have, it's mandatory to have one woman director. Even that
Correct.
implementation is sporadic. And we have, on the other hand, we have the directives in the European Union which say that, they don't give a number, like a minimum one number. They give a percentage, 30 or 40% of the workforce have to be women directors. I mean, imagine board of directors where only there's one woman director. How do you expect her to influence any change in the policies? So,
And witch hunting is also, witch hunting, character assassination becomes very common when woman is alone.
right.
So I think all this this thing you can take up in double standards of all
Definitely.
the international organizations when
Definitely.
it comes to women from the developing countries. So North-South discrimination, that also.
I'll take a note. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your feedback.
Yeah, even I was wanting to speak about the North-South conundrum. So that's already been spoken, and I wish you all the best for this.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti ji, and thank you, experts. Next, we have Maya ji's presentation. Maya ji, please unmute yourself. And Shweta, can you bring up her presentation?
Hello everyone, good evening from Nepal. This is Maya Kadir. I'm undergraduate student of Environment Science and researcher of SARC Secretariat. Currently I'm involved in International Youth Changemaker Ambassador Fellowship Program also, and also the Fellow of Chinese Nepalese Youth 5-year Program of Chinese Embassy, Nepal. Okay, thank you very much for the organizer team for giving this beautiful opportunity. And my research paper on feminist foreign policy approaches to empowering women in Nepal's climate diplomacy. Here, I have been added some important points about foreign policy, which refers a national strategy in dealing with other countries in encompassing political, diplomatical, environmental, and security policy. In context of Nepal, like many countries, is deeply affected by climate change with unique vulnerabilities due to its geography and socioeconomic structure. Despite their significant involvement in environmental management at local level, women remain underrepresented in Nepal's foreign policy, especially within climate diplomacy. through foreign policy, a country seeks to stand women's role in climate diplomacy. This abstract presents a multi-layer analysis of how Nepal could incorporate feminist perspective to enhance its international climate strategy, making it more inclusive and responsive growth, thereby facilitating long-term economic prosperity. Please for next slide. The major objective of this research paper is global experience with feminist foreign policy to analyze the success and challenges of Sweden and Canada's feminist foreign policy in climate diplomacy, and another is Nepali women contribution to climate resilient, to document local example of women leading in climate adaptation despite barriers, and third one is barrier in diplomatic representation, that gender inequality within Nepal's foreign affairs ministry hindering women's participation in climate diplomacy. Please for next slide. For the research paper, here have some methods that I will be adopt. The first one is interview to conduct with women in Nepal's environmental, diplomatic, and policymaking sectors to understand their perspective on barrier and opportunities. And next one is comparative analysis of feminist foreign policy model, that reviewing the framework of countries with established feminist foreign policy, identifying transferable practices, and third one will be policy review, that and this is national determined contribution of Nepal, which has been adopted and which has been newly formed, a systematic examination of Nepal's existing climate and gender policies, which relate with and this is national determined contribution of Nepal 3.0. Please for next slide. Through this research paper, we will be able to find barriers to women's representation. Nepali women face numerous structural challenges in entering climate diplomacy, including institutional gender bias, where a limited requirement of women in Nepal's diplomatic and climate policy making roles. And another is insufficient training program, like lack of specialized training and mentorship for women interested in diplomatic career, particularly in climate diplomacy. Women's role in climate resilience. Nepali women actively contribute to climate resilience at the community level, managing natural resources and leading initiative in sustainable agriculture and disaster response. These experiences highlight their critical role in environmental stewardship and indicate how their involvement in diplomacy could provide valuable on the ground insight into climate resilient strategies. Therefore, it is important to look at foreign policy with a gender focus to know the real gender segregated impact it could have on the climate action. Please for next slide. Here have some literature review for the research paper. Feminist foreign policy originated as a progressive step towards a diplomatic framework that emphasized gender equality, inclusivity, and human rights. Sweden was the first country to implement feminist foreign policy, followed by other like Canada and Mexico. This country saved as case studies showcasing how feminist foreign policy principle can transfer policymaking by embedding gender equality and supporting women's leadership. In Nepal, although climate policy efforts such as the National Climate Change Policy 2019 acknowledge the role of marginalized group, there is limited focus on gender equality in foreign policy.
Maya ji,
Please for the
wrap
next
up.
slide.
Please wrap up in 30 seconds. Yes,
Okay, please. The next slide. In conclusion part. For the conclusion, incorporating feminist foreign policy into Nepal's climate diplomacy represents a significant step forward for both gender equality and climate resilience. This approach emphasizes the empowerment of women as key stakeholders in climate diplomacy, ensuring their contributions are recognized and valued by drawing on international model of feminist foreign policy and adapting them to Nepal's unique socio-political context. This research suggests that feminist foreign policy can serve a transformative framework for Nepal's diplomatic agenda, align it with global standards for inclusive and effectiveness. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am. Yes,
Hello.
yes.
Yes, ma'am. Will you be Mayaji? Will you also include the learnings of two major disasters Nepal had experienced, landslide and
Yes, ma'am.
deluge? Okay. And how
Yes,
did
ma'am.
those how did they influence shaping of Nepal's climate change policy? Hello.
Last time we have seen there have two different disaster, one in Thame Valley, which was nearby Himalayas, Mount Everest, and another was nearby Kathmandu, in Kathmandu Valley, that Nakku area. There was a flash flood, and when you compare that Thame and this Kathmandu, most of the women were in the prone zone, because women is always disproportionately affected from climate disaster. They are not getting much space to speak that what kind of challenges they are facing, and how can be that kind of challenges could be solved. But when you talk about climate negotiation, when you talk about climate diplomacy, there is always a space for a male, not for a woman. But women are the most who has a lot of problem to solve their household issues and to solve their community issue. That's why we have to empower women through leadership program, through the training, and through this research paper. I think they have some solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayaji, for your presentation. And in one of your slides, you mentioned about the role of women in the climate diplomacy negotiations, etc. So I think we should be more vocal about our ask in terms of having more women, because as much as my knowledge about Nepal's foreign policy is that Nepal has had just one female foreign secretary so far, who is at present, and we need to have more female policy makers and negotiators. So if and there is when we are comparing it with other countries, it may be more useful in comparing our comparing Nepal with other countries, neighboring countries, especially maybe India, Pakistan, and other countries, like maybe co-opting so many policies that we have, that all the countries have. Instead of simply, comparing the policies of the industrialized West, that will also give a sense of better comparison, so to say. Thank you.
Also humanitarian aid, no? In
Right,
every
right.
disaster,
First
massive
responder.
humanitarian, and not only by the state, even civil society. I remember so many trusts were formed when they saw that girl with tears, a Nepali girl who had lost all members of the family. So many people started, the civil society also responded, no? And there were so many queries how they could support her, whether they could adopt her or they could send the relief material there. So, and so many such initiatives have taken place even from the civil society organizations. So the same when there were floods in Pakistan. That time nobody used a jingoistic language. They were all concerned about human misery and how to do the handholding of the survivors. Yeah. So I think that would bring a more optimistic and inspiring this thing that even in the midst of disaster, so much of social solidarity exists.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, I will acknowledge those things and I will try to improve it.
Yes, it's a good proposal.
Thank you,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Maya ji. Next, Moona ji, if you're ready, please unmute yourself, and can we have their presentation now?
Am I audible? Hello?
Yes.
Is there any way I can share the presentation on my own?
Yes,
Yeah,
you should be seeing the share button, so you can just go on that.
Actually, I'm not sharing my video. Is this visible to everyone?
Your PPT is not visible. Only your
Okay.
voice is audible.
I actually did share it, but I don't know why it is not visible. Is it visible now?
No, it has started. Yeah, visible. Yes, it is in working mode. You can make it slideshow mode.
Yes, yes. Hello everyone, I'm Anaka Khatib. I belong to Multan, Pakistan. I work as a lecturer of international relations in the Department of International Relations, Multan. And currently I'm on study leave and doing my PhD from Qaid-e-Azam University. So I have chosen this topic, feminist foreign policy in Pakistan, prospects and challenges, because I believe that much have not been, much is a big word, in Pakistan, there are very few voices that talk about feminist foreign policy or women in diplomacy. So basically, this research paper investigates the prospects and challenges of implementing a feminist foreign policy in Pakistan. And this is, in my opinion, this is a very important aspect to explore because Pakistan falls in the bottom three countries when it comes to gender equality indexes, as per the World Economic Forum Report 2024. It is faring only better than Afghanistan and Syria. The aim of this study is to analyze how feminist principles can impact Pakistan's foreign relations, particularly in terms of policy development and diplomatic engagement. The research gap of the study is that literature regarding feminist foreign policy is focused on global north mostly, and there is a significant research gap in the literature concerning global south, particularly South Asia, and most particularly Pakistan. In fact, when it comes to Pakistan, this aspect is mostly underexplored. And I think that this is maybe because feminist foreign policy has not been discussed in Pakistan because of the economic, political, and the cultural dynamics of Pakistan. Pakistan have been more of a garrison state and concerned more about security and less about welfare. So maybe that is one of the reasons. The objective is to analyze the incorporation of feminist foreign policy mechanisms in Pakistan's foreign policy with a focus on gender mainstreaming, equality, regional stability, and foreign relations, and to evaluate the structural challenges and explore the political, cultural, and institutional challenges that hinder the implementation of a feminist foreign policy. I think that the use of the word implementation is also kind of an overstatement because we haven't even started a debate about a feminist foreign policy or an inclusive foreign policy in Pakistan. So I would identify and recommend policy frameworks and mechanisms to Pakistan's leadership and diplomats regarding a gender responsive approach in diplomacy. The research questions of this study are that I want to explore the potential benefits of implementing a feminist foreign policy or incorporating the feminist principles in Pakistan's foreign policy. What sorts of challenges, both internal and external, would Pakistan have to tackle in order to implement a foreign policy? It's pretty futuristic, but I would like to look into it. And how do Pakistan's internal gender dynamics, its commitments to international conventions regarding gender equality, entangle with its diplomatic relations? And how could they be aligned with the feminist foreign policy? Why is Pakistani academia not generating a discourse regarding feminist foreign policy? This is actually one of my major motivations to know that why Pakistani academia is not talking about it. The research methodology I would employ is that qualitative approach combining data analysis and case studies, key official documents such as official government statements, foreign policy reports, speeches by Pakistani diplomats. I would analyze them and try to gauge how gender is currently addressed in Pakistan's foreign policy. I would also have semi-structured interviews with foreign policy experts, gender experts, diplomats, and gender advocates in order to gather insights into the practical challenges and prospects in incorporating this foreign policy. And in conclusion, I would like to recommend strategies for integrating feminist foreign policy into Pakistan's international diplomacy setup. Thank you from my side. These Fabulous Fridays have been very insightful and very informative for me, and I am very thankful to Impreet for giving me this opportunity to learn and share. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Naji, but some of the terminologies you are using, they are value loaded. So you'll have to be careful and use the academically acceptable language about describing your country. Okay, but when it comes to like feminist foreign policy of Pakistan, they are having certain achievements of Pakistan. That means you have a women's quota within the parliament. That is a positive thing. You had a very robust women's movement and women action forum. And you also had so many important stalwarts in your country who thought of feminist solidarity beyond the national territory. And you have had many women with portfolios in your country. So that too you'll have to acknowledge. There has been a backlash. Currently, there is a backlash globally as well as in your country. But I think the historical legacy of feminist activism, women's rights, feminist solidarity, being part of the South Asia network, that all those things also we need to bring up, because that has its bearing in the current interest in feminist foreign policy. Otherwise, how would all the 3 courses we had massive participation from Pakistan. Students, teachers, diplomats, bureaucrats have joined. That means there is an urge to interact. There is an urge to reach out to other nations. No? So that is quite healthy, because otherwise you would be complacent that we are the supreme, no? Like Hitler would say that we are the supreme race and we don't need to learn from anyone. We don't have that kind of spirit, and that has come because of this kind of a historic legacy that you need to bring up.
Thank you so much.
And there is a lot of literature. If you go through the website of Sangat, South Asia Women's Network, no, by which Kamla Bhasin had started, Kamla Bhasin, Rokhaya, Khushi Kabir from Bangladesh, Nigat Syed Khan from Pakistan, or Meena Acharya from Nepal. So that is it has all documentation and archival material on what all used to happen during 70s, 80s, 90s. No? So even the flavor of those moods, no? And the articulations which came in that period can also be captured.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I would like to add that to one side at somewhere that Swat and Afghanistan are the only places on earth where granddaughters are less educated than their grandmothers. So something like that is happening in Pakistan as well, that our grandmothers were much more active when it comes to feminist activism compared to us.
Yeah, but that is true for us also. My grandmother took part in freedom movement. All those 15 women who took part to work with for framing of Indian Constitution. You should read the writings. They were much ahead of their time. The kind of things which we are not talking now, they were talking about. So I think that is reversal of women's rights and women's entitlement has happened globally, and it has happened in Pakistan also. Same in Afghanistan. We used to meet like women from Rabaa, Revolutionary Women's Movement. They used to come to Delhi and we used to meet during 80s Women's Decade. They used to come. They're so articulate, so gifted, so active in public life. And now where are they? Because of the backlash. So that happens in history. Such phases come. But then we also remember our legacy and try to turn back the wheels of history in a progressive direction. It is a phase in history.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. Taking the points from Vibhuti ma'am, you may have come across the various de-radicalization efforts by women's rights groups against oppressive regimes, and also for in fostering positive changes, especially in relations between India and Pakistan. And also they have challenged core male dominated narratives, and they have brought out unique analysis of state violence and interstate relations. So if you could go through the Women Action Forum of Pakistan, that's quite interesting, and also the Sabawoon Trust, and also the Paiman. So these are very interesting, and also the work of Sabah Gul Khatak. She has been very vocal in bringing about such work. So such lenses could be studied, and there are so many examples of women's rights groups and women taking this positively forward in Pakistan. So you could do some really interesting work out of this. Thank you.
So, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have Parvez Babuji. Please unmute yourself and can presentation now. Parvez ji, are you present?
Okay.
Yeah, I am here.
Yeah, please go.
Okay, hi, very good afternoon to Professor Vibhuti ji,
Hi.
Dr. Simi Mehta, and thank you, Priyanka. And very good afternoon to all the participants. So my presentation is Passes to Adopt Feminist Foreign Policy. I am a journalist from Bangladesh. Next slide, please. Introduction. Feminist foreign policy is the policy of a state that defines its interactions with other interests and movements in a manner that prioritizes gender equality and intensifies the human rights of women and other traditionally marginalized groups, allocates significant resources to achieve that vision. Next slide, please. Background. In the background of the study, I will draw upon the growth, relevance, and adoption of a national FFP in different geographies. This section will also elaborate on the theoretical framework of a national FFP and its close nexus with international ethics, scholarship, feminist IR, and theory of care. I will introduce the idea that a national FFP is of prominence to take forward SDG 5. Next slide, please. Research methodology. Within feminist research methodology, gender is seen as a primary organizing category and provides a lens to seeing and knowing social worlds and its realities. This approach to research helps to examine how women understand their gender. Research methods will be using secondary qualitative and quantitative methodologies, including the secondary source of ethnographic data, journal articles, blogs, research papers, newspaper reports, Center for Feminist Foreign Policy reports, and government publications. Next slide, please. Statement of problems. Feminist theories do not allow for the natural tendencies of men. They do men exactly what they claim was wrongly done to women for centuries. Care-based approach clouds the basic moral code. Next slide, please. Research objectives. There are numerous reasons why countries should adopt a feminist foreign policy. Among other things, it creates accountability and resistance to the anti-gender and anti-feminist movements and provides an opportunity to stand up for some of the most marginalized. The 7 reasons that countries should adopt a feminist foreign policy. Number 1, it's an ambition to create a more just world. Number 2, it creates accountability. Number 3, rights, resources, and representation. Number 4, it's an opportunity to stand up for and with some of the most marginalized. Number 5, it is a resistance to the anti-gender and anti-feminist movements. 6, it broadens our view on security. Number 7, it provides a framework for finally funding women's organizations properly. Next slide, please. Research question. Considering the feminist movement on gender role, the root causes of domestic violence against women, my research questions will be when and why do countries adopt a national feminist foreign policy? Next slide, please.
Praise, please wrap up in a minute.
Yeah, one slide only. Yeah, conceptual framework. This is the last one. The core concepts in feminist theory are sex, gender, race, discrimination, equality, difference, and choice. There are systems and structures in place that work against individuals based on these qualities and against equality and equity. The concept of factors affecting the framework and adoption of a national FPP are the motivation of the state to adopt progressive feminist policies, different models of women, women empowerment that the dissertation inspects the resources and the agency available to Global South developing countries to advance and achieve a national FFP. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Your second slide is a problematic because feminism doesn't believe that men are naturally violent or men are naturally like that. All of us are socially constructed. You must be knowing about Simone de Beauvoir's standards. The woman is not born, she is made. The same way man is not born, he is made. So feminism doesn't believe that men are naturally bad. It is the kind of upbringing they get. So I think that is going to become a problematic because your philosophical foundation of feminism itself will be questioned. So the rest of it is fine, excellent. But that particular thing that feminism doesn't accept the natural man, no. No man is, that is what the social Darwinists think. We don't think like that. We think that all of us are socially constructed, the way we are socialized. In fact, after Bhavri Devi was raped, the women who supported her, there was so much of burnout. They all went on a hike to Himalayas. And for 6 weeks, they were just climbing up the mountains. Nowhere did they hear a single bad word about women. They were not protected. They had nothing except their sleeping bag, and they were sleeping on the mountains at night. No man came to harass them. That means these men in Himalayan valleys, they were not taught to be misogynist. They were not taught to be aggressive. Mother Nature was harsh on them, but men were not harsh on women or children. So I think this is the social, the upbringing that makes you. So I think that particular slide, you just think about it, because feminism doesn't believe in that kind of a man who is a naturally aggressive or violent or this thing. That is what the diplomats who believe who to not give important assignments to. We don't believe. Simaj.
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much, ma'am. And nice presentation, Parvez ji. And my point is about when you have mentioned the various aspects of a progressive feminist foreign policy, there were many other things. And if you could just incorporate the concept of equality you have mentioned, equity needs to be incorporated, and how all these, my suggestion is that how all these concepts can be situated in the in terms of Bangladesh. So that will give your whole research a very nice output.
And
Thank
it will be something new also. Yeah.
Yes, it will be
Because you
something.
will also bring so many ground level realities and capture what is happening in Bangladesh, because Bangladesh has a record of so many women in public life. And currently our fellow feminist who was also resource person for IMPRI, and she's also addressed feminist foreign policy in the previous 2 courses. She's also Akhtar, no? And Farida Akhtar. She's in the cabinet.
Oh, yes, advisor,
Farida.
advisor.
Farida has addressed these courses in the previous 2 cohorts. Yeah, feminist foreign policy. She
Okay.
spoke on feminist foreign policy and climate issues.
Yeah. I mean, she's very prominent in
Yeah,
women
so
empowerment.
even her interview or some case studies of such women who are working, because her work in fact, Gayatri Spivak became grounded because she traveled with her from New York to Dhaka. And on 8 hours, she got a heavy dose of feminism and ecofeminism from Farida to this. So that's what, it's a legend that Farida has been extremely influential.
Yeah.
That would make increase the value of your chapter very much.
I will talk to her and will give you a
Yeah.
reference.
Yeah. And even if she gave a keynote address to gender law in Sophia College online, because she had to visit the flood affected areas. She could not come to India. We were ready to sponsor, but she gave online lecture. She pre-recorded lecture and she sent it to us. So even she, on online, at least you can, or even WhatsApp video, you can enter.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Professor Dibhuti ji and Dr.
And she
Shruti
respects,
Mehta.
she respects IMPRI quite a lot. She has been even on the panel discussion of IMPRI.
So I feel honored to be a part of IPRI. and this fellowship. Yeah. And
She's
I am
a
looking forward.
distinct-
I am
Yeah,
looking
and
forward to
she's-
working with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and she is a distinguished visiting faculty of IMPRI, Madam
Wow.
Farida Akhtar. Yeah.
Wow. I'll
Yes,
definitely
honorable.
meet her and we'll talk
Yeah.
about you and IPRI. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. All the best, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Parvez ji. Thank you, ma'am. Our last presentation for the day is by Samukezi ji. We have a video presentation by them. And Samukezi ji, if you're available, can you please unmute yourself?
Has joined. I saw the name. Yes.
Yes, there.
Yeah,
Hi.
Samukesi. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi,
Yeah,
good
yeah,
evening.
yeah.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm here.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Shweta, can we have the video presentation now?
Sorry, I think it's longer than 4 minutes, so you're more than welcome to just cut it at 4 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last one, no? So we get. Okay. Yes, come.
Shweta, I think sound is not on this one.
I think this is 100%.
If you share, stop sharing and then share again and check for an option where it says share sound.
Okay, got it. Yes. Is it
Good morning. Good morning. My
Yes.
name is Samagesa Mrugulangwenya. I'm from University. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Samagesa Mrugulangwenya. I'm from University of Limpopo, South Africa. Thank you for awarding me this opportunity to share my my study via this platform. I have not been very well in the past few weeks, and I'm still just trying to get back on my feet. So I'm just going to share a really snippet of what I thought I was going to do, and I'm still going to do even post the fellowship. So the title of my study is Transforming Diplomacy, Exploring the Possible Implementation and Impact of Feminist Foreign Policy in South Africa. So when I applied for the fellowship, eventually I thought I was going to probe further the possibilities of South Africa exploring feminist foreign policy, knowing that South Africa, in Africa or globally, it has been identified as one of the countries that has high numbers of gendered violence for a country that is not in conflict. So my thinking, my problematization and my articulation around the study was that if then South Africa can be able to make, a promise at an international level, then it could potentially be at a space where it could find solutions to end gendered violence. Not to create a bad or negative image about my country, we do have, really good policies on GBV. We have amazing laws and acts and policies. But what I've gathered is that we have a huge problem with implementation, where you find that there's a disjuncture between, the law, the legal framework, the legal document versus the implementation on the ground. So initially, if time had allowed and if I did not get this distraction of not being well, I wanted to do like a short film where I was going to like have conversations with different people and put it together, and just to share with you the lived experiences or the narration or what ordinary South Africans are feeling about the scourge of gendered violence in the country. So I can still do that. I still want to do that because I understand this is not the end of the fellowship. We still have to submit final submissions towards the end of the year. So My my reason behind the study, this is a very personal study for me, as a Black woman who, navigate my day-to-day existence in the country, every day, and I have these conversations with friends and colleagues to say every day when I step out of my house, I'm always worried that am I going to make it back? Where men have become, more like people that we fear, where you step out and if a man asks for your number, you're so scared to not even give them your number because you might end up being a person who gets missing and is never found. So we saw a wave of movement organizations, movement organizing in the country, like hashtag Am I Next, hashtag the total shutdown. And these were strategic social movement organizing that were calling the government to account and to like really give attention to the gendered nature, the violence, the brutalizing of women's bodies, and not only women, also gender non-conforming persons, and also sometimes in some instances men and children. So we saw how grassroots movement, they uprooted this uproar and called this attention to the government to take a stance and to do something about gendered violence. So different scholars are writing, like Reggie 2022 saying, that we have South Africa has the highest rate of sexual violence globally, with reports that, sexual violence occurs approximately every 35 seconds. And that is a very scary statistic, um, giving you again that idea that you always have to navigate our movement, always have to navigate the way we move and the way who we speak to, always having to watch over our back. So I'm not going to go over everything because I might not have enough time, but one of my objectives that I wanted I have 3 objectives for the study. The first one, no, 4, but one that I can quickly share is I wanted to analyze our current foreign policy and how it aligns with gender equality principles. So I wanted to check the tenets of the current foreign policy and what does it say about gender principles, how it's planning or it's making commitments to uphold gender equality and eradicate all instances and all visibility of violence. So I wanted to also identify, possible challenges and opportunities in implementing a feminist foreign policy approach to foreign diplomacy in South African context. Because I mean, the identity that South Africa has carried, which is negative, that we are the rape capital of the world, it also has negative implications to South Africa's partners at a global level. It also has implications to different industries in the countries like tourism and so forth. So I love my country and I would want to contribute into making it, a livable, friendly, and safe country. So then, for me, then exploring the possibility of a foreign policy would mean then that it goes beyond just thinking about domestic policies, but thinking about this international commitment that we can make. I'm sorry this is a bit longer, but I really tried to summarize everything in this short time that I had. I appreciate the space. I am getting better, and thank you so much. And I look forward to hear what other fellows have been up to when I catch up from the video recordings. But thank you so much, and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuski, for a very, very moving presentation and being so authentic about your analysis on gender-based violence and the protest and the resistance with the collective voices of women have been doing. We express our solidarity, and I think your paper is going to be Your chapter is going to be very, very useful because we have only known more about the anti-apartheid struggle and the gender-responsive budgeting in South Africa, but some of the internal dynamics which have emerged in last 10 to 15 years, we don't know much about it, and I think it's going to add to
Yeah.
the knowledge. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
so much. Yeah.
My side, I would like to congratulate you, and I'm so proud of you to having made this audio and video recording. And I hope that you are getting better now. And I really look forward to reading your work. And I'm sure it's going to be very, very powerful. Best wishes and congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Samukezi. Thank you, everybody. This brings us to the end of our presentations for the Feminist Foreign Policy Fellowship. We do have a couple of videos left over, but in lieu of time, I think we'll share them with the experts for their feedback. We can gather those later on since the participants are also not available at the moment. With this, I think I'll go for the closing remarks to Professor Vibhuti Patel and followed by Dr. Simi Mehta. Ma'am, over to you.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Because I need to charge my earphone. Yeah. Okay. So now I think it's very difficult to encapsulate what all has transpired in terms of the extremely well-researched, data-driven, and analytically rigorous and theoretically robust presentations made by more than, I think, 15 world-renowned scholars for this course, and also 54 presentations we had from our participants. On 6th of December, we had 18 presentations. On 8th of December, we had 12 presentations, and today we have had 24 presentations. What emerges, I can just give the trend analysis and the major highlights of all the presentations, and this in terms of scope, in terms of issues, and in terms of the common knowledge that emerged, the collective wisdom that emerged. First of all of us are united in expressing that gender consideration should be integrated in all aspects of diplomacy and foreign policy. Prioritization of discriminatory and laws has to happen, dismantling of the laws and social norms, and implementing special measures and quotas for women's equal representation. In the very first lecture it came. Feminist foreign policy initiative should be bottom-up, adequately resourced, designed in collaboration with all relevant stakeholders, and evaluated at regular intervals with engagement of communities they affect, and also accountability mechanism should be appropriate. The systems and structures should be made accountable in terms of conflict resolution, in terms of WPS agenda, in terms of SGD reporting. The third wisdom that emerged is that adequately resource sustainable development initiative, especially the climate change, with so many, more than 10 presentations related to the climate change challenges, and development of comprehensive, fully costed national action plan. Today, I think several presentations from the participants talked about national action plans for implementation of WPS agenda and gender equality issues, increasing the work participation of women, and the scaling up of resources to promote peace. I think that's very important in the context of Gaza, even in the context of current wars in several African countries, the resource crunch, which the aid workers have reported as this thing, even in the context of crisis faced in Afghanistan. Allocation of resources, sufficient resources to support global and regional research on the feminist foreign policy, and it should be mainstream in the academic discourses. That is also very important. Scaling up and amplification of successful models in terms of crisis management, disaster management, is very important. And climate and environmental policies within the framework of feminist foreign policy should have a broader efforts of advancing gender equality. It is not only scientific intervention or the intervention for disaster management, but every step should be gender inclusive, and it should promote gender equality, recognition of women and girls as agents of change, and facilitating their full and equal participation in design, implementation, and in terms of decision making should be there. Women are not just victims of the climate tragedy, but they have a resilience. I think that also came out from the presentation of both Nepal and Bangladesh. Ensuring feminist foreign policy supports to just transition. I think just transition is a very important issue, with one of the resource persons brought in, especially Dr. Vaida Nayanar had brought in the question of just transition. And also climate activists are also talking about just transition, where you are not only just by introducing solar energy or wind energy, you are not solving the problem, because what are the technologies we are using to harness those energy? In that, if you are using the mining and you are using child labor, so that has now become a current issue, that just transition should not cause more marginalization, exclusion, and vulnerability of those who are already vulnerable. That means forest dwellers, indigenous people, and the rural folks. They should not be penalized for attaining this quote unquote just transition. That is the latest discourse happening globally and mostly in the Asian countries. A use of feminist foreign policy to shift the focus of the WPS agenda and peace building more broadly to conflict prevention, and also develop a long-term vision and strategy for achieving positive peace. Because the classification of negative peace, that means you just have ceasefire and stop war. But what is positive peace? Positive peace is a complete rehabilitation of war-affected people, the kind of challenges we are facing currently in Gaza, in Sudan, and Ukraine. So that kind of approach has to be there. And we should have intersectional approach right from the very first lecture, and by Dr. Simi Mehta and Dr. Madam Mishra, most of the speakers and experts, they emphasize intersectional analysis of gender norms, colonialism, decolonial efforts, unequal power relations, which are the root cause of conflict, and also resisting the securitization. That means militarization. Dr. Manisha Madhav's lecture, she talked about that, how in the name of securitization, most of the budget is going for military endeavor, and it is a competitive securitization. If one country gets into arms and the arms race, that has taken away the major allocations from the developmental needs. So I think these are some of the very important concerns with the peace builders and human rights defenders. Even among the participants, we have so many of them who are directly engaged in a peace building effort, and also human rights investors, especially our friends from Myanmar who are now in exile. Who are participating in this course. So investing in capacity building and support for developing countries is significantly very, very important. And what we need is also high quality gender disaggregated data by income, gender, race, ethnicity, migratory status, disability, geographic location, and other characteristics which are specific to certain national contexts, and also engaging in a multi-stakeholder partnership. I think today's valedictory address by Ambassador Anil Trigunayaji, he also said that why it is important to have multi-stakeholder partnership to strengthen feminist foreign policy. Whether you use the term feminist foreign policy or not, that is also another question, because most of the Asian countries are keeping distance from this term. But gender equality, gender mainstreaming, these are the endeavors which are happening in Asian countries, and we should be open for a dialogue with them also. So respecting leadership and policy space of partners to implement context-specific sustainable development policies, and slowly and gradually increasing through dialogue, through network, through organizing such courses, creating a congenial and amiable atmosphere for discussing the feminist foreign policy frameworks is very important. So facilitating engagement of the private sector, of the politicians, of the government administrators, I think these are very, very important so that we can have more and more partners, and we should be ready to listen to all perspectives and voices, because they can play, and this kind of dialogue only will create new socially transformative gender equal world order. So it is, there are the whatever risks and rewards are there, we should be, all nation states should share fairly, equitably. Private investments in gender equality are not undermined by the impact of corporate activities, including those of multinational corporations and extractivist industries, especially the mining sector, and some of the human rights violation that we have seen in the African countries by the mobile industry, or by the extraction of more and more minerals by using women's labor, women and children's labor. So this kind of issues also come under. So it is not only the question of diplomacy and conflict resolution, but also what kind of trade relations and what kind of trade policies we have when we engage in the bilateral or multilateral trade. They also come under the purview. So I think it was a very important learning experience for all of us, and it expanded our horizons of feminist foreign policy. Thank you very much. Dr. Seema.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And what a way to learn from you at the end of this Feminist Foreign Policy Fellowship. Yeah, I am fully in agreement with you. This entire fellowship period has brought about rich scholarship, and also from scholars from all around the world. The upcoming scholars, the emerging scholars, and it is very heartening to see that there is an interest, and there is some kind of a restlessness that the time is now, actually, and having or internalizing gender equality and gender analysis in various aspects across sectors, social, economic, political, environmental. This is the need of the hour, and this would actually ensure that the policy makers in the countries across the world would actually better understand the impact of foreign policy decisions that actually has its repercussions on the individuals and every part of the community, so that nobody is left behind. And this is actually the whole concept of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, the world is one family, as it is espoused in the Upanishads in India. So it has been very fabulous, and I take this opportunity to thank the Asia Foundation and also my team at IMPRI. Thank you, Dr. Arjun Kumar, and everyone at IMPRI for having that kind of faith in each one of yourselves, that you will be able to do it. And most of all, our gratitude to Professor Vibhuti Patel for chairing the session and for so effectively delivering all the remarks and helping the upcoming researchers, emerging scholars with their presentations. And we really hope that there will be a very, very positive outcome out of this fellowship. And this is the first cohort, and we have great times to see. I wish all the scholars, all the researchers, fellows, all the best with their remaining of the fellowship, and I hope that you'll be able to incorporate the suggestions that have been put forth here. So thank you very much, and it's quite late. We have been able to sail through this very successfully. Thank you. It's very gratifying, very heartening. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Vibhuti ma'am, and thank you, Sevi ma'am. With this, I think I'll proceed with the formal vote of thanks, and then we can conclude. This brings us to the end of Feminist Foreign Policy Fellowship, an online international winter school program, a 3-month immersive online introductory leadership certificate training fellowship program. I, Priyanka Negi, researcher at IMPRI, would like to express my gratitude on behalf of the Asia Foundation, New Delhi, and IMPRI Center for International Relations and Strategic Studies, and IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center, New Delhi. I would like to thank our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, and the expert for today, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat ji, for taking out their valuable time and their thought-provoking insights on the topic. I would also like to thank Ms. Nandita Barua ji and Dr. Simi Mehta ji for taking out their valuable time and providing us the suggestions for the presentations. Now, next, I would like to thank all the fellows who presented today on diverse perspectives and topics. We would like to thank our participants for making this fellowship a success by raising important questions throughout the fellowship and actively contributing to this thoughtful dialogue that is essential to the essence of this fellowship. Thank you for your engagement today. We hope that this fellowship will be a transformative and enriching experience for each of you. Have a good night, everybody. And yes, thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Priyanka ji. Yeah, thank you, Samaski ji. Yeah.